You're listening to Margins and Meaning with John Wilson. Margins and Meaning accepts zero responsibility for remakes, delaminations, fractures, open contacts, collapsed bites, or any full arch that came back from the mill looking perfect and fit like it was designed for a different human being. We also accept zero responsibility for the technician who automated the wrong half of his job, the one that tried to teach the computer the part that was never supposed to leave his hands, or anyone who confused getting faster with getting better. Anything I say on this show is just my opinion. It's not gospel. It's not CE. It's not a product demo. And there's nothing for sale today or any other day. If you came looking for a product launch, you came to the wrong garage. And remember, if you choose to listen to anything discussed here today, you do so at your own risk, preferably with a full night's sleep, a sharp set of burrs, and a good sense to know the difference between a tool that frees your hands and a tool that quietly replaces them. Listen at your own risk. Thank you. It was 4:30 in the a.m. I'm sitting in my home little office. I have my first cup of coffee, and I sit down and click the mouse. The quiet glow of that monitor starts to come up as that computer comes awake. I take my first sip of coffee there, and I think about the day ahead of me and the challenges and tasks that I've put in front of me. I'm sitting here with a new case, a full arch case that I need to work on today to get that wax up ready and to share my thoughts with my client. Surgery days tomorrow, we're going to change a life, and I want to be prepared for it in the most fastidious way that I can. It was just another tough case that I really enjoy. The kind where the implants were going to come in at difficult angles for remote anchorage, and I was going to adapt and overcome and come up with a good plan to make a solid restoration. You know, I'm thinking about this case, and all of a sudden, it hits me. You know, I've seen this case before. I've seen something that was just like this case. I remember what I did in the prior case. I remember how I overcame the challenges. I thought about this for a minute or so as I was looking at this, like I was reliving some sort of deja vu moment. And the truth of the matter is, I hadn't seen this case before. I didn't know this patient. I'd seen something that looked similar. You know, my hand was already moving before my brain really finished that thought that I actually really couldn't have actually known this arch, could I? But I recognized the fact that there were similarities. I knew it because I maybe had seen its cousin 6 years back and maybe 40 years before that. You see, I sat there in the dark and thought for a moment that right there, the thing that just happened, that's the whole job. That's the part nobody can teach you in a weekend. That recognition. That's 40 years standing up and walking across the room to somehow help me in this specific moment. And the most amazing part is I didn't even have to ask it to do it. And then I thought something that actually scared me. What happens to that when I'm gone? Welcome back to Margins of Meaning. I'm your host, John Wilson, and this is episode 21. Thank you for being here, and I mean that more than usual today because this one's a hard one for me to record. I've started this episode about 4 times, and I keep walking away from it. And I think the reason is that I'm about to tell you something I'm really not finished thinking about yet. And you guys know that's not how I like to do it. I like to bring the lesson after I've actually earned it. I like the story to be maybe over before I tell it. This one isn't over. This one's happening right now in real time in my shop, and I still don't know how it's going to end. So if you're looking for that tidy version, the version where this old guy figured it out and hands you the moral on the plate, well, it's certainly not coming today. Today, you get the middle of it, the part where I'm still in the furnace figuring it out. Let me back all the way up because there's a contradiction I have to put out on the table before any of the rest of this makes sense at all. For 20 episodes now, I've been telling you one thing. I've said it in about a dozen different costumes, but it's been the same thing every time. I told you the software doesn't feel. I told you that the most powerful tool in the lab is your voice, not the mill. I told you there's this kind of judgment that can't be downloaded, that you earn it through reps, the reps that don't lie. That's what you carry with your hands with enough years that the one thing the machine can never take away from you. That's been the spine of this entire show. You see, technology answers the how. Wisdom protects the why. You've heard me say it. Some of you can probably say it with me by now. So here's my confession. I've spent the last year trying to maybe download mine. I'm going to let that sit for a second here because I really do know how that sounds. You see, the guy who built this podcast on the idea that judgment can't be put in a box has spent a year quietly in the dark before anybody gets to work, trying to put his judgment in a box, trying to take the thing I told you that was sacred and irreplaceable and was the last real stand of the human technician and trying to make some sort of copy of it. I didn't tell anybody. I barely told myself. I called them little side projects. That's the real word I used. Side projects. Little things I tinker with. And about a week ago, somebody asked me what I'd been up to, what I'd been working on. And I heard myself say, oh, just some side projects. And then I stopped because that was a lie. There's nothing sideways about it. I've spent more nights on this than I've spent on anything else since the garage years. It isn't a hobby. It's the most important thing I've built in 20 years, and I was so afraid of what it might mean that I've been hiding it behind small words. So let me tell you what that actually is. And let me tell you why it scared me bad enough to hide. Do you have any idea how many full arch cases I've done? Yeah, I've said that number before in this show, and I'm not going to keep waving it around because the number was never really the point. I think the point is what's underneath the number. You see, every one of the arches that I've made or been a part of have taught me something. And often it wasn't in a way that I could write down in that exact moment in time. It was just a way that maybe settled into my hands. And here's the thing about that kind of knowing, it's really trapped. It lives in exactly one place. It lives in me. It can't easily get out. When I solved that tough angled implant case at 4:30 in the morning by remembering its cousin from 6 years prior, well, that solution doesn't exist anywhere except in my skull, in my hands. The arch I made 6 years ago is in somebody's mouth. The decision I made is gone. The only record of the judgment is that I still carry it. And I tried to teach it once, and that was what the starting point of this whole thing is all about, if I'm being really honest about it. Now, I remember a time where this younger technician asked me a question, and we were contemplating on one of his cases. It's a very difficult case, one of those ugly cases that fight you from every moment. And he asked me this really simple and honest question. He looked at me and asked me very specifically, hey, how do I know where to start? That simple question. And somehow I opened my mouth to answer him and nothing really came out of value. I think I looked at him and said something like, oh, you just feel where it wants to go and you just keep pushing forward. And the fun part is watching a kid's face when you say something like that. He's thinking, that's not an answer, old man. That's not what you know. That's not the thing I'm coming for when I'm having a conversation with you. It had only ever been in my hands, guys. So how the heck can I go ahead and verbalize that to somebody else? Especially when this kid was standing right here wanting to learn, wanting to understand, wanting to decipher and dissect what has put in those 40 years of reps. And it bothered me because what good is everything I know if the only way to hand it over to somebody is to have them standing next to me for the next 20 some odd years to soak it on up? Well, guys, that type of teaching is near impossible today. That kid doesn't have 20 years. The trade sure doesn't have 20 more years. The benches are emptying out faster than that. And the ones still filling up are filling up with people who learned on a screen and never had an old man to sit beside. So I stopped trying to say it. And I started trying to show it instead. And what I started doing was simple. And then it stopped being simple. You see, I started keeping them, the arches, not the cases, the arches, the shapes, the setups, the solutions, hundreds of them now. And I started organizing them in a way my head already organizes them, by the kind of problem that they solve. This is the family of arches for when the bone went the wrong way. This is the family for when the patient's old smile has to be honored even more than it was when it was natural. It was never ideal. This is the one for when you've got nothing to work with and you have to manufacture a result out of pure compromise. Hundreds of arches sorted the way a tech's instinct sorts them, so that when a new case lands, you're not starting from a blank screen. You're starting from 43 years, right? And guys, that's the heart of it. The rest of the projects, well, the ways I've been working to pull that case data is cleaner. The work I've done so the software talks to itself instead of making me babysit it, all of that is real and all of that matters, but it's plumbing. It's there to clear the junk out of the way. The heart of it is this library. The library is the reps. The library is everything my hands know. Finally, maybe sitting somewhere outside my hands. The first time it actually worked. The first time a brutal case landed and I pulled that right family of arches and watched it take me 80% of the way to the starting point in about 10 minutes instead of 2 hours. Well, I didn't feel proud. You see, I felt sick. So let me tell you why I felt sick, because that's the real episode. The rest of this was just the setup. You see, I sat there looking at this thing I just built. The thing that I've spent the last year chronicling. The thing that I've spent more than 10 years thinking about. The thing that takes the most valuable, difficult, most time-consuming work that I can produce. And the first clear thought I had about it was, John, what have you done? Because think about what I've been preaching, my friends. I've been standing up in front of you, in front of rooms full of technicians over my career, telling everybody that the reps are sacred, that you can't shortcut the judgment, that the kid who got fast on the tools without putting the years in was missing something he doesn't know he's missing. And here I am building the exact shortcut I warned them about, building the thing that lets somebody skip the part I said you just couldn't skip. Did I just hand the race to the bottom a brand new engine? That was the fear. The whole trade is already getting commoditized and already getting flattened, already getting sold by the unit by people who never poured a model in their lives. And here's old John, the supposed defender of the craft, building the tool that makes it even easier to flatten. Was I the arsonist that was showing up to his own fire? I'll give you a moment that really got under my skin because it wasn't abstract. You see, a while back, I was in a room, one of those rooms talking to a group of younger techs. I believe it was after a lecture that I was talking about CAD CAM, but the question came up in the room what I thought about the initial AI design proposals that were hitting the market. You know, the automatic stuff that let the software place it and you clean it up type of stuff. And I got up on my high horse, I looked at them, I told the entire room that if you let a machine make the decision before you've earned the eyes to know when it's wrong, well, then you're not a technician. You're just a button. You see, I remember the exact phrase because in the moment I was proud of it when it came out of my mouth. You're not a technician, you're a button. And now here I am, 4:30 in the morning, building a machine that hands you the decision before you earn the eyes. I built the button. I'm the guy passing out buttons. So you see, the sickness wasn't theoretical. I had this specific kid's face in my mind, the one I'd lectured to. And I pictured him finding out what I'd been doing here in the dark, and I pictured exactly what he'd be within his rights to say back to me. And underneath that fear was a worse one, a quieter one, the one from episode 20 that I told you I wasn't done with. You see, if I can put my judgment in a program or a library, then what was left of me? You see, I built this whole identity on being the guy who carries the thing that can't be copied. That was my answer to, am I still necessary? You see, I'm necessary because what I know can't leave my hands, and then I went and proved that it could. I proved that I can get it out of my hands and into a box. So if it's in the box now, what am I? Am I just the guy that used to be necessary? Did I automate myself right out of the one thing that made me matter? I want to be honest with you about how dark that got for me, because I think some of you are closer to that fear than you actually let on. You see, I believe anybody who's good at something is a little afraid of the day that the thing that they do well gets easy. We tie ourselves to the difficulty. We make the difficulty mean something about us. And the second somebody, even ourselves, make it less difficult, we feel it like a loss instead of a gift. Guys, that's ego. I know it's ego, but knowing it's ego doesn't make it hurt any less at 4:30 in the morning. So I sat with that for a long time. Years, really. Months of building this and getting closer, building it in the dark, scared of the thing that I was building, not really telling many people about it and calling it a side project so I wouldn't have to face it. And then the case came in that answered a question for me. The case answered it. I didn't. So here's the case, and I'm going to describe it in a very composite way. I'm not going to point to a real person, and I think you know why by now. But the bones of the story is true, so let's get into it. It was a very difficult arch, the kind I built this exact program and library for. So I did the thing. I pulled the right family, and the library did its job. It got me to the starting point fast, and it handed me those 43 years of pattern recognition in about 5 minutes. And I sat back and looked at the thing that I created and what it gave me, and I recognized that it was wrong. Not wrong like broken, wrong like this was the right answer for the pattern, and this patient is not the pattern. There was something about this case, the way this particular person's tissue had healed, a story that the surgeon's notes were hinting at but not really saying. Something about how this human being was going to actually function that this library couldn't actually see. The library knew everything I'd ever learned. It did not know this patient. It couldn't. It wasn't in the room. You see, let me tell you how I caught it, because the how is the whole point. It wasn't a number. It was nothing that was measured wrong. And every spec you can pull, the library answer was clean. I caught it the way you catch a wrong note in a song you've heard 1,000 times. Something about the way this person's smile was going to sit when they actually talked. Not the way they posed for a photo, but when they talked, told me that the library handed me something beautiful, but wrong for this particular face. And there was a line in the surgeon's note, almost a throwaway, haphazard line about the way this patient held their lip, and the 43 years lit up over that one line, and I said, nope, not this one. This one's different. And here's the 4 things you're going to have to change to get it exactly right. You see, the library didn't see the line. The library can't read that throwaway part of the equation, and that's when it landed on me. Clean and simple. The library has everything I know and none of what I notice. And I sat there and I felt the whole fear just drain out of me because I finally understood what I've actually built. I didn't build a replacement for the judgment. I did build something that replaced the part of the judgment that was maybe already dead. So listen to me on this, because this is the thing it took me a year and a lot of late nights to actually understand. You know, there's 2 kinds of judgment in what we do. And I'd been treating them like one specific thing. There's a judgment that recognizes the pattern, that this arch is like an arch from 6 years ago. And then there's the judgment that adapts the pattern to the living person in front of you. The first one, the recognition, that's just memory. That's storage. It feels sacred, but it's actually the part of the library that can be held. Because it's already happened. It's already over. It's already a record. The second one, the adaptation, the looking at this exact human and deciding where the record stops applying and your hands have to start taking over. That one can't be downloaded. That one was never going to download. I tried. It just wouldn't go. So I could store the arch, but I could not store the decision. So here's what that library actually did. It didn't take my judgment. It took my drudgery. It took the 2 hours of rebuilding from scratch, the patterns I'd already mastered, the slow part, the part that was using up the best hours of my day on work I'd already done 1,000 times, and it gave me those hours back. And it pointed me faster to the place where I would eventually have gotten to. That exact place where the real work starts, the place where the pattern breaks and the patient actually begins. The place where you actually need a technician. It didn't make me any less necessary. It walked me to the front of the only place I was ever necessary and said, this is where they need you. I cleared the path for you. Let's get started. So let me tell you what this is for. Not what it is, what it's for. Because the for is the whole thing. For my entire career, the math of this trade has been backwards. The most skilled people spend the most time on the least skilled part of the work. Think about that. The 40-year tech and the 2-year tech both have to grind out the same setup, the same baseline, the same from-scratch construction before either of them gets to do the thing only the 40-year tech can do. We spend the best hours, our sharpest hours, the early morning hours when our hands are good, doing work that doesn't need our 43 years. And then by the time we get to the part that actually needs the master, we're tired. We're on hours 6 or 7, and we're giving the hardest decision, the worst version of ourselves. And that's the part that nobody talks about. Technology was supposed to fix that. And a lot of labs, it just didn't. It just sped up the wrong things. It made the commodity faster and left the craft exactly as slow and exhausting as it always was. We automated the assembly line and left the artist doing the artist's work on fumes. I know that tiredness personally. I've made my worst decisions at the end of the day, not because I got dumber at 5 o'clock, because I spent my best hours, those 4:30 hours, the sharp ones, grinding through the baseline on cases that didn't really need the sharpest version of me. And then the cases that did need it would land on my bench in the 7th hour when my eyes were gone, my patience was gone, and I'd give the hardest judgment of the whole day, the worst version of the man that I had become. I've remade cases I would have nailed on the first pass if I'd hit them in dawn instead of dusk. I can promise you that. That's not a skill problem. That's a sequence problem. I was spending the best part of myself on the work that didn't need it and bringing my leftovers to the work that was mine alone to do. 43 years of that. And I never once questioned the order of it because that's just how the day went. What I want, the thing I've actually been building toward in the dark, is maybe to flip the math. I want the machine to eat the drudgery so the human gets to spend the bulk of their best time on the beautiful part. The part where you're making something that's going in a person's face for hopefully the rest of their life. The part that deserves your sharpest hour, not your most tired one. I don't want technology that just creates beautiful work. I want technology that gives the time back to the people who create the beautiful work. So the beauty stops getting exploited and ground down for how slow the rest of it all is. That's not a race to the bottom. That's just the opposite. The race to the bottom is when you use the tools to make the cheap thing cheaper. What I'm talking about is using the tools to make the valuable thing more possible, to protect the hours where the value actually lives. And here's the part that put a lump in my throat, the part that finally let me stop being scared of it all. That library is the only version of me that will outlive my hands. When I'm gone, that arch I made 6 years is still going to be in somebody's mouth, but the decision is gone. Unless somehow, some way I can get it out. Unless some young tech 20 years from now working on a case I'll never see can pull a family of arches and feel 43 years standing up and walking across the room to maybe help them out. The way it walked across the room that morning to me, that morning in the dark where I made the best decisions that I could. They won't know it's me, and they don't need to know it's me, but it'll still be me. It'll be the reps. It'll be the thing that I've always said dies with us, maybe not dying. And that's not automating the craft away. That's the only way I've ever found to make the craft not die. You know, there's this bench in my shop I look at more than I should. I'm not going to tell you the whole story tonight. Some of you have heard pieces of it across this show. That bench used to have somebody at it, somebody I thought for a while might carry this thing forward. You know, that's an episode for another day, and maybe it's one that I never fully record, but I'll tell you what an empty seat like that does to a man at my age. It makes this whole question sharp. Because for most of my life, I believe there was only one way to pass this on. You find the one person, the right hands, and you pour yourself into them for years. And somehow you hope to God that some of that takes. That's how it was done for me. Somebody poured into me, stood next to me when I was the kid that couldn't put words to it yet, and let me soak it out of the air year after year until somehow it was in my hands too. And the trouble with that way is that it only works once. And it only works if the person stays. And guys, people leave. They should leave. They've got their own road to walk, and I've never once held it against anybody for walking it. But when they walk, everything you poured into them walks out the door on their 2 feet, and you're standing there at 60 with 40 some odd years of knowing and an empty chair beside you. So if I'm being honest with you, and I've never been anything else on this show, this library started as my answer to that empty seat. If I can't count on one person staying long enough to catch all the wisdom I have to share, then maybe I got to find a way to get it out of my hands and into a form that doesn't need just one person to stay. A form that's still sitting there for some kid who shows up in 10 years that I'm never going to meet. I won't get to stand next to them. I won't get to pour into them face to face. But they'll pull a case, and they'll land on a starting point that took a man 43 years to learn. And they'll never know my name, and that's fine. That was never the point. My name was never the point. The point is that the knowing didn't go to the ground with the last guy who had it. I think that's the truest reason I built it. It wasn't just for speed. It wasn't just for the hours to gain back. That empty seat. I got tired of everything I know being so fragile that it could stand up and leave with one person. Now, I told you at the top of the show I wasn't going to wrap this into a bow, and I'm not going to start lying to you now and make that happen. I know I've built something cool. I know it's functionally different than anything out in the market, and I know that it has value. But I'm still not sure about all of it. I'm not sure where the line is. I found one line, That line between the pattern and the patient, the storage and the decision of it all. And I'm confident about that one, but there are other lines that I haven't found yet. How much do you actually hand a young tech before they've earned the eyes to know when the library would be wrong? Because that's the case I told you about, the one where the library handed me the wrong answer. I only knew it was wrong because I put in those 40 years of reps finding that out. A 2-year tech might have just taken what that library gave them and ran with it, straight into a remake, or even worse, into a result that technically worked for a little while, and then quietly failed. So is the library a gift to a young tech, or is it a trap that lets them skip the exact reps that would have taught them to catch its mistake first? I don't know. I generally don't know, and I think about it every day. And I'm not sure I'm the right person to be building this anyhow. You see, I know this trade. I know what has to be protected. That's the entire argument for me actually even doing it. But I also know that the second a tool like this exists, it doesn't stay in the hands of the people who respect what it's made of. It gets out. It gets copied by people who only see the speed and never understood the actual true cost. And maybe by solving my own problems in my own shop, I'm starting something I just can't control. And I think about that too. So no, this isn't a finished thought. This is me at 4:30 in the morning in a dark shop building something I believe in and afraid of at the exact same time. Building the answer to a question I've been asking for 20 episodes and not totally sure the answer is safe. But I'll tell you the one thing I'm sure of. The one thing that got me to stop hiding it behind a small word. I'm not done. I said that the last time and I meant it, but I didn't tell you what I was building because I was scared to maybe look at it. But now you know. I've been trying to get the best of what's in my hands out of my hands before my hands give out. That's it. That's the whole secret project. An old man trying to make sure that the part of him worth keeping doesn't go into the ground with him. And whether I've built a gift or a Pandora's box, I haven't fully decided. Ask me in a year. By then, I'll either be proud of it or I'll be telling you the episode about what it cost me. Could go either ways, guys. I just don't know. That's the honest truth of it all. But you guys have always gotten the honest truth from me. And here it is again. So here's where I'm going to leave you. If you got something in your hands, something only you know how to do that nobody around you knows how to do, I want you to ask yourself the question I've been wrestling with, the question that scares me. What happens to it when you're gone? Not your business, not your name, the knowing, the thing in your hands, where does it go? Most of us will never answer that. We just carry it until we can't. And then, unfortunately, it's gone. And the trade is a little poorer and nobody sometimes even knows what was lost. I decided I didn't want to do it that way. I decided to try to get it out, even though getting it out scared the hell out of me. Even though I'm still not sure I did it the right way, I'm sure of one thing. I've tried. Maybe that's the real work in the last part of any career. Not doing more, but getting what you did out of yourself and into a form that can keep going without you. I'm in the middle of finding out why, guys, and I'll bring you the rest when I know it. But until then, I say, protect your margins. Protect your meaning. I'm John Wilson. Thank you for being here, and I'll see you next time. Take care.